and I had to fight with the GHMC officer. I was asking something, he says it's not my jurisdiction. I said, all right, how do you define jurisdiction? He says it's not my department's work. So I said, okay, I'll slap you. And what will you do then? So I said, I'll call the police. There was a lot of police. If you saw the video I sent. So I said, I will tell him this is not your department work. He's not from your department. Hmm. So I'll slap you. I'll give you one proper slap. I mean, I didn't realize that I had such a nasty temper. I was so tired running up and down, no electricity, no water. Okay, I mean, you can stop taking a bath and all, but what about the other needs? Without water, how will we survive? Oh,
Mm.
it was desperate measures. So, anyway, I am sorry about this. I'm not well because I have been running to that electricity office, the GHMC, and then Kishan Reddy came and he was kicked out by the people. By then I had done most of the things. They said, "Ippudu Amir vachedi." Uh, So he beat a hasty retreat. Uh, Okay, so uh, so just let me wind up that now that we've found some new this thing on the Ganapadas, uh, I want to tell you that even though people like Salator say Ganapadas and Janapadas are the same, it doesn't seem to be so. Okay, it doesn't seem to be so because uh, Ganapada, as we have seen, uh, Gana is a classification, but a Ganapada is all those 9 names that I told you the other day, owing allegiance to different deities of Shiva's family.
Mm.
Okay, they are all different deities owing allegiance to Shiva's family, which essentially means that the Ganapada uh, is uh, more of a mythological thing than a historical thing. Okay, because I have again searched some books and I have not found any use of the term Ganapada in any of these books. They talk about Janapadas. And like I told you, Janapadas do not talk about armed forces. Okay, they don't talk about armed forces. They only talk about law and order machinery within the Janapada. Whereas the Ganapada seems to be that these are like soldiers. The Ganas are basically like soldiers. Okay, and we could have accepted it and said, okay, when uh, soldiers were introduced, then the Janapadas basically transformed into Ganapadas. We could have taken that interpretation, but not finding any reference to this uh, Gana and one reference there is to Pada. It's otherwise it's only about Ganas that you find in Shiva Purana. And in Ayurveda, I told you Shushruta created 37 families of medicine. Ganas is, family of plants. So 37 different families of medicinal plants. He created that. Then I also told you that Gana was a lady who served the king. What was his name? It's just gone out of my head. Forgotten his name. Why has this happened? Skanda. Yeah. She served Skanda. She protected him. So that is just one more reference, but that is her. It's a proper noun. So that is a different thing altogether. So the only reference to the Gana as being some kind of an organized this thing is from the Shiva Purana. And we do not know the historical authenticity of Shiva Purana, because the Shiva Purana, some people say, was written in response to the Vishnu Purana, which the Aryans brought with them, okay, or the Aryans created. So let's not talk about whether the Aryans are indigenous or they came from somewhere. We shall not go into all those things. The Aryans were basically worshippers of Vishnu mainly, and some accounts of history based on evidence, radiocarbon dating, based on that evidence, they show that Shaivism is older than Aryan, this thing, the invasion, or rather the Aryan establishment of the Aryan rule. And so Shaivism, if it predates Aryan civilization, then it looks like in response to the Vishnu Purana, those who were Shaivites, I talked to you the other day about gerrymandering. I hope you remember that. Okay, gerrymandering is incorporating things into your own this thing, and that process of gerrymandering resulted in the incorporation of pre-Aryan forms of worship, pre-Aryan forms of uh, pantheism, polytheism, whatever it is. I told you Naga worship was added. Then the whole concept of this Ammavaru, as people talk about, all those things were apparently added on through a process of gerrymandering. The same thing happened with Buddhism and Jainism. Okay, Jainism, though it is older than Buddhism by about 5 centuries, somehow it did not become as popular as Buddhism became. Okay, Buddhism not only spread within India, but it also spread outside of India. It went to China, it went to Japan, it went to all the Southeast Asian countries, as did the Sanatana Dharma. I told you, Cambodia, that particular country has one of the biggest temples in the world, and it is a Vishnu temple, and that is called Angkor Wat, Angkor, Angkor VAT, Wat, Angkor Wat, and you see Mount Meru, which is supposed to be the residence of Vishnu, that is also in Cambodia. So, and if you remember, I had also told you that the word Hindu somehow seems to have gone to Japan, and they call it Shinto. Though they are a minority population, the majority population is Buddhist. So though they are a minority population, still the Shintos are in substantial numbers in Japan. Okay, it's like the Muslim minority in India. You say minority, they are not a very small community. Muslims are nearly 300 million people in India, and they're the second most. India is the second most populated Muslim country. I mean, as far highest is Indonesia. Okay, and if you, since we brought in Indonesia, if you look at Indonesia and if you look at Malaysia, both these countries went the Islamic way. They went the Islamic way in later years. And the amazing part about um, Indonesia, for example, is that they have names like Shanti, Susanti, okay, and they are Muslims. And I don't know if you know this, but the the Indonesian currency is the rupiah, and on the currency note, you will find even today Lord Ganesha. Okay, and Indonesia till very recently would not do azan as we hear in the mosques here, where they call the faithful to come for prayer. They wouldn't do azan, they would ring bells. Okay, they would ring bells calling people for prayer. No azan, but I believe it has started there also now, this azan thing. Anyway, but even today, Ganesha is very much on their currency notes. And then if you look at Malaysia, which is the other country which has gone with a majority Muslim population, Mahathir Mohamad, who was their prime minister at one time, his ambition was to build the biggest Shivalinga in the world. Okay, Mahathir Mohamad wanting to build the biggest Shivalinga in the world, right? So those people also have no problems. They built it. Not only did they want to build it, they built the biggest this thing, Shivalinga. And somehow Malaysia wants to have everything big. So the Petronas Towers, at one time, they built it as competition to the Empire State Building. That itself led to all kinds of competition. And Taipei built one thing called Taipei 1, which they said is the tallest building, not the Petronas Towers. It was called the Taipei 1. And seeing that, the Arabs built the Burj Khalifa, which is the highest standing hotel. It is one of it has now become a second tallest building because another building has come up in Abu Dhabi. This is in Dubai, and but the amazing part is this is a hotel, and I am told the building shakes if there are. It's engineered in such a way that it shakes a bit when air currents are powerful. So interesting. everybody trying to outbuild the other. But the important thing to note is that Malaysia, despite being an Islam dominated country, wanted to build a Shivalinga. So, and they built it. It's the world's biggest Shivalinga today is in Malaysia, nowhere else. And so we'll have to perhaps say Ganapadas are something whose mention is more mythological than historical. There is no historical evidence of Ganapadas having ruled in India. And therefore, the ideal thing to stick to is the Janapada. But if you do get a question in the examination where they ask you, please give the etymology from Shaivism. Okay, please give the etymology from Shaivism and say that Saletor says that there is no difference between Ganapadas and Janapadas. Please write that as an answer, because otherwise these other facts that I have dug out, I'm absolutely confident that my colleagues don't know a thing about it. So whoever corrects the papers, I don't know who corrects these papers, so they should not penalize you. So that is why I'm saying you write Saletor. Okay, you write what Saletor said. Now, having said that, having talked about the Ganapadas as being more mythological, and the Janapadas perhaps being more of a historical thing, then we have this transition to the Mahajanapadas. Okay, and before I get there, let me tell you an interesting fact. People talk about communal divide in the country. People talk about communal divide. They say Hindus and Muslims don't get along with each other, which is a very unfortunate thing, because I don't know if you know this, the Amarnath Yatra that is done every year in Kashmir, all the Hindu pilgrims are looked after by Muslims, because there are no places to stay and all. It is Muslim households which give them a place to stay and all that. So in this country, at the level of the people, there is no divide on religious grounds. There is tremendous tolerance, and that is the reason why we are still one India, because of the fact that there is tremendous tolerance. Anyway, having said that, let me just move on to the Mahajanapadas. Now, this Mahajanapada is again mired in a bit of controversy. I say it is mired in a bit of controversy because of the fact that some people say Mahajanapadas existed, and some people say that they did not exist. Because when we are asked to show what are these Mahajanapadas, which Janapadas became Mahajanapadas, usually it all starts with the Nanda Empire, and then King Purushottam's empire, Porus as he was called by the Greeks. Greeks. His name is Purushottam, Raja Purushottam. He was called Porus by the Greeks. And interestingly, there is a conflict here. Some people say Chandragupta Maurya defeated the Greeks. Okay, and some people say it was King Purushottam's army which actually defeated Alexander's forces that were trying to come into in India. This is, of course, in the Khurasan region when India went extended right up to that border of Iran. Okay, India was there right up to the Khurasan area, which is the border with Iran that Afghanistan now has. So there are these two conflicting versions, but there is evidence of both King Purushottam's kingdom and the Nanda kingdom and the Mauryan Empire. All these are there. And people give these as instances of Mahajanapadas. Okay, now there are people like Jha, D.N. Jha, who contradict, and even Basham, Basham, who contradict the idea of a Mahajanapada really existing. They basically say that there was no such thing as a Mahajanapada. What was there in effect was basically a kingdom with an army. That's what people like Basham and D.N. Jha say. But Altaker, A.S. Altaker, and then Salator, they basically talk about the Mahajanapadas. In fact, they say that the Mauryan Empire later on became an empire, but the Nanda kingdom, they say it is wrong to call it an empire. It was a kingdom and it is a Mahajanapada. Porus was also supposed to be a king of a Mahajanapada, and the citation that these people give is that the citation that these people give is that before the Mauryans took over from the Nandas, before Chandragupta took over, this was a largish kingdom, and this largish kingdom basically had what one should say, this largish kingdom started building an army. Okay, so Salator and Altaker, they basically argue that Mahajanapadas started happening with the consolidation of the Janapadas, and once the Janapadas consolidated, they decided to have armies once they became Mahajanapadas, because the consolidation process itself is not something that happened peacefully. Okay, While at the level of religious incorporation through gerrymandering, everything happened very, very peacefully. But the consolidation of the Janapadas into bigger this thing, it was not a friendly merging. So people did fight with each other. They didn't have advanced weapons at that time. They had primitive weapons, but the whole idea of fighting over territory started. And it is through taking over of different Janapadas by one Janapada that led to the creation of Mahajanapadas. So people say King Purushottam's kingdom was a Mahajanapada. The Nanda kingdom, according to some, again, when I say some, I'm talking mainly about Altekar and Salator. They say that it is consolidation of it is consolidation of various Janapadas that existed, and Chandragupta Maurya, they say, was the first conqueror. So they say the early part of the Mauryan empire was a Mahajanapada, but after that, when Chandragupta Maurya became an absolute conqueror, so to speak, he was somebody who built a big army. And that was also the time that you see some kind of technological development. Now, please be very careful with the usage of the term technology, because for us, technology somehow is always associated with something high tech. Okay, we would say technology is, you know, guns. We say uh, technology is computers. That's how we use technology. Okay, so for us, technology represents uh, a leap in science, some leap in science that facilitates the creation of something. So you say missile technology, all those kind of things we talk about. Now, what I want to clarify here is that our ancestors, who were the great apes, and some of them still survive, which is what throws Darwinism into a bit of a controversy again, because Darwin said evolution of the species. Okay, so he says there was a time when giraffes were short-necked, but because they had to eat from trees, over period they evolved into what do we say? They evolved into animals with long legs and long necks. And interestingly enough, the number of bones in a giraffe's neck is exactly the same as the number of bones in a human being's neck, despite that being so long. But then you also have other examples where crocodiles don't seem to have evolved into anything. They are supposed to have been there right from the time of the uh, great reptiles, which were the dinosaurs. So they were there from the time of the dinosaurs, and they haven't evolved even a single bit. Crocodiles are crocodiles. They've remained like that throughout. So what happened to evolution there? Okay. And if we evolved out of the apes, why did not all apes evolve into human beings? Because even today, if you see the bonobos, B-O-N-A-B-O, bonobo is one kind of a big ape. Gorillas and chimpanzees, if you see them, you find that they make tools with stone, just like the early man used to make. So when we talk about technology, even stone tool making will count as technology. All right. So here we are talking about metallurgy coming into the picture during the Mauryan times in the Mahajanapadas. You have swords, okay, you have the shields, all of which were made of metal. So metallurgy was one of the earliest technologies in India, and apparently Indians knew about this technology much before the rest of the world actually had any idea about this technology of metallurgy. And one of the most amazing things is that if you've been to Delhi, I don't know how many of you have been to Delhi, right next to the Qutub Minar, there are two other historical sites. One which is called Alai Minar, which is Alauddin Khilji. He tried to construct a minar longer or higher than the Qutub Minar. He couldn't, so it fell, and you see the ruins of that. But more importantly, there is one pillar which has the edicts of Ashoka. It is a pure iron pillar. It is thick, heavy, and it is put there. And people say if you can put your hands like this and reach behind the pillar, and if you ask for what you want, it will come true. But your hands have to reach the back, at the back of the pillar. So in my thin days, my hands used to reach. In my fat days, they don't anymore. So that, but that apart, what is extremely interesting is that this is an iron thing, and everybody knows that iron catches rust, and this is left out in the open. It's been there for centuries in the open, not a bit of rust. So the ancient Indians were not exactly untechnological. They knew they had technology. Even the weapons that they started using, they packed arrows with some explosive material. So it wasn't just an arrow that goes and shoots somebody, it would also explode. Okay, and then they were slowly, over a period of time, they were given the name of astras. Okay, so the people who made these were called the fire rights. F-I-R-E, fire. W-R-I-G-H-T, right. A right is somebody who works with metal. Okay, so these people combined fire and metal and created these great, fantastic things. And Sri Krishna, the God, is also referred to as a fire right. Okay. He was apparently very knowledgeable in weapon making and manufacturing, and that he transferred to the Pandavas. If you read the Mahabharata carefully, you'll get citations of this. Anyway, so the Mahajanapadas should be taken, this is a safe interpretation because we don't have absolutely accurate facts on the basis of which we can either reject or defend an argument. So we have to take recourse to a safe interpretation. A safe interpretation is the Mahajanapada was not very long. It didn't survive for a very long period of time. It was short-lived, and it was a transition from not having armies to having armies, not using technology extensively to using technology extensively for warfare. And it is the Mahajanapadas that gave birth to the Rajyas and Maharajas that followed. Okay, so that is how you have to understand a Mahajanapada. It is a transitory thing. It says less than a minute, so I'll stop here. I think tomorrow is a holiday, right? Bonalu.
Yes,
Yeah. So Monday we'll have a class, and we'll carry on.